Chess YouTube, what is the strongest opening for white in the game of chess? Well, if your name is Magnus Carlsen, you might say the Catalan Opening. Now, Magnus has been playing the Catalan Opening non-stop with the white pieces ever since his World Championship match with Jan Nepomniachtchi in the year 2022. And this opening, I mean, in the hands of Magnus, even most players in general, is just so insanely strong. It may very well be the strongest opening for white in 2025. Now, what is the Catalan Opening and what makes it so ridiculously strong? And how can Magnus show us how to play this opening as white? Well, it occurs after the moves d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, and then here the two main moves for white are going to be g3 and knight c3, and the Catalan occurs after the move g3 here. This is the key Catalan move. The idea is very, very simple. White here is trying to fianchetto this bishop on f1 on the g2 square. From there, white castles and then pressures on the queen side with this bishop just slicing down the board. This is the real strength of the opening. The bishop on g2 is going to be so strong throughout the entire game. I mean, just compare the strength of these two bishops. This one on f1 heading to g2, slicing down the board, versus the black one, which is hemmed in by its own pawn structure. That is the entire reason this opening is so strong. Well, that plus the space advantage, plus the overall long-term pressure white gets, and Magnus is just a monster with this opening. And in this video, he breaks down exactly how to play this opening as white, and this game did take place this week in this week's Titled Tuesday tournament on chess.com, so a very, very recent game indeed. All right, from here, black has many different ideas. The main lines include bishop e7, bishop b4 check, and d takes c4, and there is some theory for all of these lines. But again, white's idea in all of these cases is very simple. He's just trying to go bishop g2, castles, potentially regain the pawn on c4 if black takes it, and from there get a very good game with good long-term pressure. That is the basic idea. That's really all you need to know if you're just starting out with this opening. Now, in this game, black plays the move bishop e7, which is a very solid move. It's the classical QGD, the Queen's Gambit decline move. Black's idea is simple. He wants to castle, and from there, either take on c4, or go c5, or go knight bd7. There are a lot of options, but black here is playing the most solid of solid lines in response. Now, Magnus here, he plays his plan. Bishop g2, black castles, white castles, and then here black's main move is going to be d takes c4, capturing the weak pawn on the c4 square. Now, that's the main move by far. Most grandmasters play it, but instead in this game, black plays the move c6, achieving the infamous pawn triangle formation with the pawns on b7, c6, d5, e6, and finally f7 like this, where every single pawn defends the other one in a triangle formation. Now, if you want to play the Catalan, it is so key to understand what to do right here in this position. So black, his plan is simple. The bishop on g2, at least for right now, is blocked in by the black pawn structure. Of course, the bishop here is sort of biting on granite, as they say, that d5 pawn being so incredibly well defended. The bishop on g2 doesn't have a very bright future yet. However, that could change later in the game if the center of the board does open up. Now here, Magnus, what is his plan? How does he want to proceed? Well, it begins with the solid move here, simply queen to c2. Now, this move is a multi-purpose move. It does two different things at once. First of all, it defends c4. That is very important. Black here, with the pawn on c6, was threatening to take on c4 and then go b5. For example, if white went for a move like knight c3, black could take on c4, then go b5 in the spirit of the semi-Slav opening and defend the pawn on c4 and have potentially some decent chances to get an edge out of the opening. Now, instead of that, here, white simply goes queen c2, defending the pawn on c4, and first of all, it defends c4. If black were to take on c4, white takes back, and white is doing outstanding here. Now, beyond that, the other idea is white can also threaten e4 in the future. For example, knight bd2 and then e4 is one idea, trying to open up the center, and if the center does open up, then the bishop on g2 suddenly comes to life, and that would be very dangerous for black. So queen c2, a very good multi-purpose idea in the Catalan in general. Now black here plays the move b6. What is the idea? It's simple. Black here is trying to go bishop b7, and from there, perhaps knight bd7, rook c8, and finally c5. A very typical idea in the QGD, the Queen's Gambit declined, in general for black. However, the one drawback of this plan, it is very slow. Black here is not putting a lot of pressure on the white position, and therefore Magnus can do virtually whatever he wants in this position. Now, there are many plans here. One plan is the knight bd2/e4 plan. That one's very strong. The computer here also likes the idea of playing b3, rook d1, knight c3, bishop f4, and so on, getting basically good squares for all of your pieces and defending c4 with the b pawn. Now, in the game, white does go knight bd2, the first plan, a very good plan. Black goes c5. Okay, a little bit of a surprise. So what do you do in chess when your opponent plays a move that you didn't exactly expect? Well, the first thing you do, as always, whenever your opponent makes a move, you ask yourself, what is the opponent's threat? Black here is trying to open up the center of the board, trying to capture on potentially d4 and c4, but the problem with this is white is the first one to move, and white can always capture on c5 or d5, getting a good game. Magnus here, he proceeds. C takes d5, and black takes back with the pawn. E takes d5. Okay, from this position, we know Magnus, anytime he wants to, can capture on c5, and from there, no matter how black recaptures, he's going to have at least one vulnerable pawn on d5, if not two on d5 and c5. And in the game, Magnus here, he does trade on c5. We have d takes c5, and then b takes c5. So this right here is known as the hanging pawns pawn structure. Black here has pawns on c5 and d5, and the pawns can be an asset or a liability. It all depends on what happens in the game. Now, they could be an asset in the sense that they control a lot of very important squares, and if black can say, push these pawns down the board and defend them, that could be very strong indeed. Now, the problem for black is the pawns are also targets and very vulnerable, and Magnus here, he finds the best way to attack these pawns right away. Now, you can play slow here. You can go, for example, b3, bishop b2, rook c1, rook d1. That's the slow way to play. But instead, Magnus here finds the right way to strike immediately, and he plays the move e4. Now, what's the idea behind this? It's very simple. First of all, in chess, you always want to check these more aggressive ideas. For example, here, you always want to check the pawn breaks like e4 and b4 and so on and say, are they any good? And it turns out here, e4 is a very strong move. Here's why. If you take the pawn on e4, white takes back with the knight, and suddenly the pawn on c5 is very weak. The white rook's going to d1, hitting the queen on d8, and so on, and white gets a great game. Now, the problem also is that black goes d4. White has the intermediate idea of e5, hitting this knight, and very importantly, opening up this diagonal for the bishop. And now we can see the true strength of the Catalan Bishop. I mean, if this knight moves off this diagonal to, say, h4, g5, e1, even taking on d4, the bishop would come to life, hitting the rook on the a8 square, and black would be simply cooked. Now, instead, in the game, black here, he does go knight c6, which is a solid idea, bringing out one more piece into the game and allowing white to trade on d5 if he wants to. From here, Magnus, he plays the move a3. Now, why did he do this? It's very simple. Black here, with that knight on c6, is threatening knight b4 in certain lines. That is the threat behind that move. Magnus here, he asks himself, what is the opponent's threat? Knight b4, and therefore a3 controls b4 and stops that threat once and for all. Now, black here, bishop e6, defending d5 a little bit more, a solid move. And now Magnus, he probably should trade on d5 right now. But instead, he plays the move rook to e1, which brings out one more piece, and he's trying to basically maintain the tension versus his lower-rated opponent in this game for as long as he can. Black here plays the move rook c8, a logical idea, lining up that rook with the white queen on c2. And here Magnus does trade on d5. We have e takes d5, knight takes d5, and then knight to e4, jumping in with that knight, and finally starting to untangle his pieces. From here, the bishop on c1 can't enter the game on, say, d2 or e3 or f4. The white rook on a1 can go to, say, d1, and suddenly the white pieces all begin to come to life. That is the strength of the Catalan Opening in general. Once you unwind, once you get all the pieces out, I mean, there's just so much pressure throughout the entire game if you play correctly on the black position. From here, black plays the move knight d4, jumping in with that knight, a very aggressive idea. The problem for white, if you trade on d4, black takes back with a discovered attack on the queen on c2. Therefore, instead, Magnus here, he simply goes queen to d3, sliding out of the way of the attack and threatening to win a pawn with knight takes d4, c takes, and then queen takes d4. From here, black, queen b6, the queen flies out, pressures d4, then we have knight takes, c takes, and finally b4, gaining space on the queen's side. From here, black, knight c3 is the move, jumping in with that knight. And here Magnus, he plays a very curious idea. Knight g5, threatening checkmate in one move on the h7 square. Now, this move may not have been the strongest move in general. The idea is if black takes on g5, you do win the bishop pair, which could be strong, and that did happen in the game. We have bishop takes, but now bishop c4, and suddenly black here is the one sort of taking over in this game. But don't worry, Magnus here, he's got everything under control. He will show how to turn things around and apply more Catalan-style pressure in this game. The queen, it slides back to d2, queen d2, rook f to e8, bishop f3. Now we have f6 attacking the bishop. We have rook takes, and here in this position, take a very good look at this. Magnus, his bishop on g5 is actually trapped in this position. It can't go anywhere. If it goes to h4, g5 wins the bishop. If it goes to f4, again, g5 drives it back, and what can the white pieces do? He simply ignores the attack on the bishop, and he plays the move rook to e1, which is a very strong move. That one does deserve the exclamation mark. Here's why. First of all, you're threatening taking on e8. And if black takes on the e1 square, white takes back, again threatening queen to e8 checkmate. For example, rook takes, queen takes, and the bishop now can slide back to, say, d2, as you are threatening mate in one move. Instead, black here plays rook to f8, sliding back. And now we can see that one intermediate idea, the rook on the e1 square, is now very active, and the black rook very passive. From here, Magnus, bishop f4 is the move, basically saying if you want to win this bishop, you must go g5, which further weakens the king side. Black obliges g5 is the move, the best move perhaps. And now here, Magnus, if he trades on g5 and gives up the piece, the problem with that is queen to g6 would block the attack on the king, and black would be fine. For example, bishop takes, f takes, queen to g6, and black is doing just fine. Now, instead of all that, here, Magnus, he plays the move bishop to e3. Now, this looks insane. Aren't you just giving up the bishop for free? Well, this is the depth of the genius of Magnus. It turns out, yes, you are, but it doesn't matter. Here's why. We have d takes e3. Now here, Magnus, he does not win the knight. If you do that, that is a blunder, and black takes on f2 and wins the rook. Instead, Magnus, he plays the move rook takes e3, and black, knight b5. Now, wait a minute. Isn't black literally up the knight for like one pawn? Yes, he is, but it turns out white's attack against the black king is so strong, it doesn't matter. Here, bishop d5 is the move, forking the bishop and the king. Black must take the bishop, otherwise you lose the bishop. Therefore, taking on d5 is the response. We have queen takes, king to h8, and rook to e7. The white pieces are just swarming in on the black king here, and it's not that easy to defend the black king. All right, black, queen d6. The queen slides over, offering the trade of queens. The idea being, if you win the knight, you lose the rook, and therefore the game on the spot. Instead, queen to e4 chosen, again, defends the rook and threatens mate in one. Black, he has to defend, and the best move here is queen d1 check, intending king g2, queen to h5, defending h7. Instead, f5 chosen in the game. It hits the king, but now, queen b7. The queen slides over, threatens h7, and threatens mate in 2. Rook takes, king g8, queen g7, checkmate would be a finish to this game. Therefore, black, queen to f6, guarding g7, but Magnus, he is not done. Rook takes h7 is the move, king to g8, and now rook to h3, sliding back, again threatening checkmate in one move. Black, rook d8, defends the mating threat, the idea being if queen h7, now king to f8 is possible. But here, Magnus, he simply wins the free knight on b5. Queen takes, and suddenly Magnus here has the attack against the black king, plus a 2-pawn advantage. How does this guy always seem to find a way to play moves like bishop to e3, giving up the piece, and then justify it, winning back material, plus the attack? I truly don't know how he always managed to pull this off. It really is insane. All right, black here, queen to e6. The queen slides over, queen b7, again threatening mating ideas like queen to h7, rook, queen g7, and so on. Black here, rook d7, defends against the 7th rank. Now queen a8 hits the king, king g7, queen to h8 hits the king again, king to f7, and finally, last move of the game, rook to h7. And in this position, Black resigns on the spot, and here's why. The only legal move, the king can't go to any of these squares. The only move here is simply king to g6. But once you go there, then the finishing blow, rook to h6, skewers the king and the queen, and White will easily win the game. And for that reason right here, Black is forced to resign on the spot to Magnus Carlsen. Wow, what a game between Magnus and his opponent, the international master Scarab B43, in this Title Tuesday Blitz game from literally this past week. And what a masterclass in the Catalan Opening for White with the move g3, where Magnus shows the basic idea, going bishop g2, castles, and if Black doesn't take on c4, ideas like queen c2, then knight bd2, and then finally e4 later, opening up the center, is just so strong for White. And once the center opens up, the Catalan Bishop on g2 comes to life, and White exerts tremendous pressure all over the Black position. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please show me some love, smash that like button, comment down below. And by the way, if you want to learn from me how to play the Catalan Opening or any other opening, or more importantly, how to reach your online chess goals, if you want to reach, say, 1,000 to 2,000 plus ELO very fast, I got your back. I can help you do it really fast. Go to drmikechess.com. That is my free online chess community where I have group coaching, community, courses, accountability, everything you need to level up and reach a much higher rating very fast. So that is all for today. If you want to learn from me, go to drmikechess.com. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.